Hey everyone, and welcome to the super late 6th episode of the indie game devlog that I was going to upload like 2 months ago, but I couldn't because of exams and school and stuff. Where I go over the development of my game, Orb. So yeah. So this episode is going to be all about writing a story, and more specifically, writing a story for a game, and how I go about it. So let's get into it. Now, one of the first things I want to talk about is actually the basics of making a game with a story. Now, when making a game, you start out making the mechanics first and then the story. You make the story around the mechanic. Because when you make a mechanic around a story, that means you limit yourself at what you can do mechanically within the game. Because if I make a story and then decide to make a game off of it, that means that everything's already been set for me. And that means I can't make any changes anymore unless I change the entire story. And that means in the mechanics I can only do what the story allows me to. So right off the bat I wanted to first make the mechanics and come up with all of the mechanics that I wanted in the game before I even started thinking about the story. However, once I did get that done, writing the actual story was a bit of a different process. Now the way I went about it is that I started out with a general idea of the events that I wanted to have happen within the story, and once that was done I broke it down into individual levels and what I wanted to have happen in each of those levels, and what I wanted that level to convey or teach the player. Now everybody has their own way of writing a story, although in general there is one main thing that sets it apart from, say, movies or TV shows, and that is input. When watching a movie or a TV show, you're just kind of there for the ride for a predetermined story, which is nice, but when you're playing a game, you have control, and that control can affect the story and vice versa. Now this actually leads perfectly into what I want to talk about next. Now what do I mean by this? To start off, I actually want to give an example of a game that I think does this very well, and that is the latest God of War game. I'll just give one small example. By the way, minor spoilers ahead, so if you want you can skip to this timestamp. Alright, good. Now in the newest God of War game you adventure with your son Atreus. And in the game they give you control over him. You get to command him and tell him to shoot certain items or attack enemies. However, somewhat later in the story he starts becoming more rebellious and he stops listening to you. However, this isn't only seen in the cutscenes. Once that happens, you actually start to lose control over him in the game, and he starts acting on his own, without any of the player's input. And I think that this is a great example. I think it's very important that stories in the game should actually affect your gameplay. It just ends up creating a more cohesive experience overall. So I made sure that some parts of the game where you really can tell where the story actually impacts the gameplay, and where your decisions in the game can affect the story even. But I'm not going to talk too much about that. I think self-reflection is very important, so I just want to take a moment and talk about the things that I think I can improve in the full version of the game regarding the story, because to be fair, in the demo there were a lot of issues. I didn't really do a good job of portraying any kind of story really. It was relatively vague, and in the full version of the game I want to be a bit more explicit, because there wasn't really a setup to the game. There was just kind of, you wake up and you do the tests because, you know? So in the full version of the game I want to have a bit more of an introduction and incentive and a reason for the player to do the things that they're doing, rather than just, here, do this because. Yeah. Now one thing that I have changed at the beginning, which I can already say isn't really a big spoiler, is that there is now a tutorial section in the beginning, which actually has a few levels without the orb before you even get it. And then here you'll also get some explanation of why you're here and what you're doing. That's one of the main parts that I think would have already helped the story be better. Of course there's a lot of other things that I could fix and change, like pacing, and I am working on that. But overall, yeah, I do think that there is a lot of improvement to be done here, and I am willing to try and improve as much as I can with the story. And I have changed already a lot of things for the best, I think. Now I had a few people already ask this question of how long is the game going to be, and well, I don't have an exact amount of levels just yet since I'm still working on that. I can say that the game itself, that the full game is going to have 6 chapters with each chapter having around 12 levels. Some might have a little more and some have a little less. And basically the demo itself was chapter 1. Now, when making the demo, I did do a few test runs with some people. It took them an hour or so to finish the demo, so I'm hopeful that with 6 chapters, so that the game is going to be around 3 hours or 3 or 4 hours. I do want a fairly decent sized story, and I do think that it's definitely possible. Having around 6 chapters with 12 levels in each averages out at around 70 levels. So I think that's a fair amount of content for the game then. A lot of people want to know more about the story, however, I'm not gonna give all of the information because I do want it to stay relatively unknown, the story. All I'm gonna give you is the general premise. So, in the game, you play as a beta tester for a company that is trying to perfect interdimensional travel for the public. You go through the tests like normal, however, over time, some things start to change. That's all I'm really gonna give you guys, just the general premise, and not too much else. Although one thing I do want to mention is that I'm gonna focus a lot more on characters in the full version of the game, because in the demo you were just a floating set of arms really. So it's already decided that in the full version of the game you are going to be an actual character with a face. And I've got one piece of concept art made by a friend that I'll put on screen right now. I'm probably going to have a lot of concept art coming out in the upcoming 2 or 3 months, so I'll be sure to post that in the Discord server and on Twitter. Or I might even make an entire video based around it at some point. Who knows? Anyways, thanks for watching. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see updates of the game, and if you want to see even more updates, consider joining our community Discord or following me on Twitter, which I try and use now. I'm hoping that the next devlog is going to be a little bit earlier. Anyways, see you in the next one.